So this thing about art versus journalism, right? When I look at your body of work from almost 40 years, it's almost like there's two Ed Kashis. There's the Ed Kashi who's in the streets and in the trenches of Syria and all these other places you've been in. And then there's the Ed Kashi that produces really artful, thoughtful work that's in the book 3, for instance, which is at the back available. And how do you resolve those two personalities? And we know from all these stories and discussions in the international media that this has been an old chestnut, as it were, this divide. The photojournalists and the art photographers don't meet in every country. Here, in China, where I'm based, in New York, it's the same thing. There's a certain rift between the two types of photographers. And I want to just talk to you about that to begin with, and then I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other questions.
Okay.
So just go quickly through some of these slides that I put together. So this is Massimo Vitali, this famous large format Italian photographer. And this is an interview he gave quite recently, where he's covering the refugee story in Europe as well. But this is what he says, he's making a protest against reportage photography. He doesn't want to go in and do the usual stuff that we see in the news magazines. And this is his take, right? He wants to produce something more artful and something far more removed. But he calls this his protest against reportage, or photojournalism, if you like. But of course, there are other critics and curators who argue that actually it's one and the same thing, right? The best of documentary photography actually is where journalism meets art. And this is Ed's take. And he coined that phrase, the manufactured rift between art and journalism. So, Ed, if you could maybe begin by sharing with us your thinking behind this quote.
Yeah, so, I want to go back. You asked how do I sort of deal with the sort of schizophrenic or the two sides, and for me it's a very organic process. I don't wake up one day and think, I'm going to be artistic, or I'm going to do something that is art. It's really organic, but it always comes from the same motivation, which is to do something that has meaning. For me that's the key, and I find too often art doesn't have meaning to me. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand some of it, but as I was saying to you, I think yesterday when we were walking through the National Gallery, that I spend most of my life around the common man. Sure, I photograph famous people and wealthy people and all that, but I spend the majority of my time around the common man, and so that is where my head is at. That's what I care about. And sometimes when you go to galleries and museums, you think, maybe like there's 1,000 people on Earth who will understand this work, but I don't see how it will have any resonance with the common man, with the average person on the street. And for me, that's where it fails. So with photojournalism and particularly journalism, because I see journalism as a civic, I see it as a critical element of democracy and of civil society. And I don't say that lightly. Really, I've been to many countries where there is no civil society and there is no free media, and quite often they go hand in hand. And so, for me, it always comes down to what I want to create, something that has meaning, that will have some sort of an impact. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, by the same token, I think the kind of work that you and I do, the more kind of traditional journalistic tradition, it's seen as very untrendy right now internationally, and it's, while socially important, seems to be read as too literal and not suitable for hanging up in galleries or in museums.
Yeah. Well, I think they serve different functions. There was a lot of photojournalism that, the truth is you wouldn't want to hang it on your wall and live with it every day. But that's not the function it serves, And I think the more disturbing, we've talked about this, and the more disturbing thing for me is that somehow, like with Vitaly's quote, that somehow capturing real people in real situations is boring. And that really troubles me.
That reality is not good enough.
That reality is not good enough. And again, we've talked about this. Now, for me as a creator, one of the things I love about what I do is that I'm in these situations. I'm with these people. I'm experiencing these moments, and I'm not having, hopefully, an impact. I'm not directing it. I'm not altering it. And there's a tremendous value to me in that. And then if I can capture it without directing it, without altering it, there is something that is very powerful to me about that. So for me, it's not that these are mutually exclusive things. I love the fact that artists are being more interpretive or more conceptual or looking at something I might look at and finding a completely different way of presenting it. That is great. We need that. I mean, it would be terrible if the world was just full of us, I think. No, that I mean, we want different points of view. It's in the same way that, you might love reading, nonfiction books. Thank goodness we have poets, right? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, so it's not like we should only have one thing. But what kills me and drives me crazy is that when the art world looks at what we do and poo-poos it and says, that's rubbish, or that's not interesting. That's all. It's a very simple, not argument, it's a very simple gripe, if you like. And what I don't understand is, what are they scared of, or what are they intimidated by, or what is the problem? That, because quite often, if people do not depict reality, then artists have nothing to work with. Boom.
And yet, I think globally, the trend, even within the more kind of journalistic magazines that we traditionally work for, there's a certain aestheticization of reality.
Yep.
And that kind of work is getting published more and more, the more conceptual end of the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear what's on your mind. But I remember, Julie, my wife, when we were talking about like MTV a long time ago. I guess MTV started in the 80s, and and when we started to get into filmmaking, and she was like, in MTV, the world it presents is there's never more than a 3-second clip. That's a pretty psychotic take on reality. Yes, it's exciting. Yes, it's really cool and energetic, but it doesn't really, in a sense, it almost, it desensitizes you to life. That life is boring, because life doesn't work in 3-second clips. And if anybody does have that life, I'd like to watch it. All right. Can I photograph that? No. I'm serious. And so it's this idea of, again, we don't want to lose the playful side of things, which I feel that is one of the great things that art does, is that it people play with reality, and they mess with things, and they reinterpret it, and they screw around with it. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. It's wonderful for us. It's wonderful for the layperson, as I say, the civilian, because it pushes you to see things maybe in a different way, right? Whereas what I want to do is in an artful way, I want to say, hey, look what's going on, right? And you can trust this. That as much as I am humanly capable of, the facts I am presenting are accurate. I am contextualizing it in as much as possible, whatever truth is, a truthful way. Do you know what I'm saying? That as much as you can rely on, the Straits Times or the New York Times or the Economist, sure, they get it wrong. But for the most part, we can rely on this information to build our understanding of what is real, what is going on in the world. And that is the function that journalism serves. And if we lose that, we're really in trouble. We get Trump.
Are you concerned about the maybe ethical implications of this trend of aestheticization?
Well, so the concern, and I think in a way you're alluding to, whether either directly or obliquely to last year's World Press controversy, but this idea that, when you create work that is more conceptual or more directed, again, there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to come clean. It's about how it's contextualized. In the same way that it's important I contextualize my work so that you know where you are and what it's about, kind of what's going on, right? It's even more important to do that with work that is more conceptual or artistic. Now, I understand quite often artists do not want to reveal too much. It's that idea of like, you don't want to have to explain everything. The idea is let it exist in face value or be interpreted by the viewer. But I think with what's happening now is a lot of photojournalists or documentary photographers who are being much more, they're directing, they're manipulating the scene, they're then not being not truthful. They're not coming clean. They're not contextualizing it properly. So this one instance with the World Press last year where something was submitted, it won an award, and then it was very clear that these were not real scenes. They were scenes that were more directed. So it was just, in a sense, submitted to the wrong contest. The pictures are still wonderful, but